Greetings in the name of our soon coming King Jesus Christ, and today we are in Daniel 9. Yo, what a chapter, guys! What a chapter! There is so much here to discuss, but I think Vidius and I, as we discussed this in great details earlier before the recording, most of Daniel chapter 9 focuses on verses 24 down to 27. Am I right? The last three verses.
Yeah. It's this is quite a, the whole Bible, how you see eschatology, how you see everything in the Bible is going to depend on how you interpret Daniel 24 to 27. And as I said in the in the group, that I've also been challenged quite a bit by things that I've been taught, but there's another way of looking at it. And as you see, you have to study it a bit and also get a little bit of understanding about the Hebrew words. But we're going to give you the two examples or the two ways of seeing it, and you have to, each one of you has to see how you, to prayerfully to ask the Lord how it, because this is going to determine how you see things. Your eschatology is going to depend on how you see that.
Yeah, there are two main. There might be many other smaller differences, but there are two main perspectives in understanding Daniel 9, verse 24 to 27. Two main opinions, two main interpretations. And they disagree with one another, so we're going to put both of them on the table for you, and you can see which one will make more sense. Let me read videos. Let me read from verse 24 down to 27. It's not a very long one. Here, this is a prophecy that Daniel received from God regarding Jewish people, but also regarding the end times. Verse 24, 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression and to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Verse 25, know and understand this. From the issuing of the decree to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem to rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. It will be rebuilt with streets and trench, but in times of trouble. After the 62 sevens, the anointed one will be cut off and will have nothing. The people of the ruler who will come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on a wing of temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end, that is decreed, is poured out on him. All right, now this is a very puzzling prophecy regarding what is awaiting the Jewish nation, but also what is awaiting the world in connection to the Jewish nation. There are, as we said, there are two opinions. One is this prophecy talks about Messiah, and it has been largely fulfilled when Messiah was crucified, and also in the years following after the crucifixion of Messiah, until Jerusalem was invaded and destroyed by the Roman soldiers. That's one way of interpreting it. The second way is this passage refers to the coming of the Antichrist, signing a peace treaty with the Jews in the last 7 days, in the last 7 years, before the physical second coming of Christ, and then breaking his own covenant in the middle of it, going into the temple, and setting up an abomination that causes desolation in the temple. So these are the two main views. And I think VDS has more to say about the perspective one, which I shared the first.
Yeah, I think what I've discovered, and when I delved into these things over the last month, a lot of us, we've taken a lot of words from a lot of teachers around the world. But what is interesting is when you look at this commandment going forth to restore and to build Jerusalem, a lot of people, a lot of scholars tend to think this is Artaxerxes Longimanus. Now he was reigning from 464 BC. Now this is almost 80 years after Ezra as Ezra. So there's a problem there with your timing. So what I've discovered, and I can give you a link to a guy, William, I think it's William Struess. He's got a book that it's amazing how we just put in all these. The Bible explains, it gives the dating. The dating, it's very important to understand what command we're talking about. According to my understanding now that I've come to understand, is that in Haggai and Zechariah, God commanded Zerubbabel and these people to go back and rebuild the temple. Now that is for me the command, and that is clearly written in Haggai 1, and it's confirmed by Zechariah. So this is where the end of I can only see that. So then 520 will be our beginning of our date, and that's 520 BC. So if that's the view that I've changed because I've studied that now. But so most scholars will take it at 430, 440 BC as Artaxerxes Longimanus. So this is the contradictions, and this is the two views. But each one of you must go and search from the Lord and do your study. So this is the first thing. And then interesting about this word Shabua, or weeks, the 70 weeks.
In the translation I use, it says 77.
77. Now
I intentionally use this translation as to my standard one, because the other translation, which I normally use, says weeks.
Weeks.
But here it says sevens.
The interesting thing about weeks, it's the Hebrew word Shabua. Shabua, it means sevens.
Yeah.
And the sevens it can be, and I think we discussed it. It depends on your timing. So if I'm an American, I talk about 7 inches, and if we're in South Africa, we talk about 7 centimeters. It's different. There's a different timing. There's a different in what we talk about. So it's quite interesting that God let this 70 weeks, 77s. It doesn't say the word there is sevens. It's not a time. So it can be a different time. And this is there's a nuance.
7 weeks, 7 years, 7 decades, 7 centuries, we don't know.
Or different timings of determining the weeks or the years. And this is the thing about the intercalation calendar, about the solar and the lunar months that works it out. So it's an interesting thing. So people take it as literal years, but it can be longer years as because it's just a time of length. So this is the first aspect. So we have to determine, first of all, when is this commandment to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem. And each one must go and find out from himself. Are you going to believe it's Artaxerxes, or are you going to believe it's King Darius in 520 BC? That's the first problem you have in this thing. The second thing is, the beautiful thing is in Daniel 9:26, there's a couple of words that it's beautiful how the Bible, and you have to have a bit of study in Hebrew. This word from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem, the Messiah, the Prince, shall be 7 weeks. Now, in the Hebrew, that's 7 weeks. There's a 761, so it's the Shabua. It's spelled, there's a nuance in there. There's a play on the Hebrew sin that it can also mean 70. So then there's a 77s again, and because in Hebrew you get words, and they've got vowel to point out where the vowels are. But that only came in 500 or 300 AD that they put these things in. So in Daniel's time, this could have meant 2 words, because phonetically they're the same. So it can either mean 70 or it can be in 7. So there's a Shabua. The Shabua, it can be 77s or 7 weeks. So there's a word play on that. The other interesting thing is it's the Messiah that will be cut off, and this is karat. The Messiah will be cut off. Now, when Daniel explains this to the Hebrew people, the first time karat comes into the Hebrew mind is at the flood, when God cut off the people because of their sin. And that you see in Genesis. But there's also a dual meaning. For another meaning is it's also the word used to cut covenant. And so you've got a destruction, and the Messiah was cut off. He was but not of himself, not for himself. He was cut off for us, for our sins. So the first karat that happened was when God cut off all the people because of their sins. And now he says, I will be cut off, but not from himself. It's a beautiful way of first interpretation. So it's wonderful how these things, and they did show doubts, and they point light. So each one must go and discover for himself how he believes. Now, as I've come to realize and change my way of thinking of discovering this, is that in Daniel 9:26, there's after 62 weeks the Messiah shall be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince shall come and shall destroy the city. Now the people of the prince shall come. So he's not talking about the Antichrist, he's talking about the people of the prince. Now this is Titus, he destroyed the temple. And the sanctuary shall be cut off. At the end thereof they shall be with a flood unto the end of the wars. Now in 9:27, this is an interlink, and I think that this he is again referring to the Messiah. Now many scholars believe this is the Antichrist, but I've come to learn, and this is why I've changed my opinion. But each one is, you must go and prayerfully study this and look at it. But this seems to me, as I've studied this now, this is again the Messiah. He shall confirm, and this confirm is a word, it's a Hebrew word, gabar. And again, when the Hebrews think about gabar, it means, it only gets used 25 times in the Hebrew Bible, and that gabar means to prevail over. So it's not something, and the first time it's the waters of the flood prevailed over the earth. So it's overcome, they prevailed over it, to strengthen it. Now, he shall confirm, he shall prevail the covenant, the Ariat, that's the Hebrew word, with many, Jews and Gentiles, for 1 week. Again, a Shabuah. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and the obligation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations. Now, interesting, what I've said last week to you, in the Talmud, the Jewish sages over the years, four things happened when Jesus, after the crucifixion, 4 things happened that the Jewish writer all see. That when Jesus got crucified, the temple, he brought the end to sacrifices. And what happened was, we saw that the cloth got torn, and ever since then, for 40 years, they had a Urim and a Turim, the black stone and the white stone, and it was always this one or either one. But for 40 years, it was always the black stone. And this is written up in the Jewish Talmud. It's interesting. For 40 years, they had the scapegoat, they had a sacrifice, and they take the cloth with the red and hang it over the door of the temple, and it usually, at the Day of Atonement, it turned white, from red to white. And in that 40 years before the temple destruction, after the crucifixion, was 40 years, and it never turned white. It always stayed red. And that turning white was a sign that God forgave the people's sins. He made atonement for them. The other thing is the menorah. The light was always, we had to burn every night through the night. And for 40 years, every night it went out in the temple. And the last thing is, every morning when the people came to the temple, the doors were open. So there's 4 things. And the Hebrews, the Jewish people all recognized this, and then the temple was destroyed. So this is all a reference to that. So
but can I pause you there? That's very good. I just want to understand, and for everyone's benefit. So verse 27, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. or for
Yeah.
1/7. So if I take what you say, based on that theory, that 1/7 actually refers to the 70 years
there's a
from the birth of
Christ
Christ
until another for 70 years.
until the destruction of Jerusalem. But Christ did not confirm a covenant with Israel on his birth.
No, but what Christ did is he made a promise. The promise, the confirming of the covenant, what he said is, I'm going to bring the Messiah, and what this confirming means is he prevails over the covenant. He says, I'm going to strengthen the covenant. So what it means,
by coming, he actually confirms the covenant.
He confirms it by covering it. So what all the prophets said
that's
is
good. That's good.
That's going to happen.
Okay, so the arrival of Christ as a baby was confirmation of the covenant God made with the Jews for a coming king. Okay, then in the middle of that, he is cut himself. When he is cut, he is killed. What then happens is sacrifices stop. That is just in the middle of the 70
odd years,
from the birth of Christ to 70 AD.
From 30 AD to 100 AD. You must remember there were the apostles. They were preaching the gospel, and they were the eyewitnesses to Jesus for about 70 years. John, we can say he went up to 100 AD. So this is just a theory, and it might be wrong, but this is what I've discovered.
But another interesting thing is, based on that theory, how does that theory then explain the second half of the verse 27? And on a wing of the temple, he will set up an abomination.
Okay, this is a reference to when Titus came in. So you can see the signal of the insignia of the Roman soldiers was always an eagle.
Yeah.
So he put in his eagle at the temple, and they offered to their gods, and they brought in the abomination. They sacrificed to their gods the day the temple was destroyed in 70 AD. So they came and so this is this I believe this is what it references here.
Okay. And the other view is the traditional view that we have heard many times.
This will happen at the end.
Yeah.
But it might happen at the end. This is, most prophecies can be dual, but I believe these things they were fulfilled, and they will be repeated again. They can be repeated again.
But now, they can't be both this and that, because traditional view says the person doing all these things from verse 24 to 27, according to one interpretation, is Christ himself. According to other one, it is the Antichrist.
Yes. Well, I think that we all agree that verse 24 and 25 is the Messiah.
Yeah.
And then we have, and after 3 weeks, is cut off and not for himself. That's still the Messiah. And then there's an insertion here. And then the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city, the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood. So that we realize that is this is what people believe is to be the Antichrist. And he will confirm the covenant. But the whole chapter of chapter 9 is about the Messiah and the fulfillment and the fulfillment of it. So each one of us has to decide, is this a fulfillment of the prophecy, or does it still need to be fulfilled? And it's I think as we grow along, and I think a lot of people have taken this, but you have to understand and study a bit of Hebrew to understand the nuances and the play on words that God uses here. So it's for me. I had to change my view from what I've been taught.
Sure. Okay, so guys, this is a very, very crucial part of the Bible prophecy. A lot of the interpretations regarding end times hinge on these 3 verses, actually, and how you see it. All right, now the following chapters are 10, 11, and 12. Now, can we combine all 3 into one program next week?
Yeah, I think so. I think chapter 11 is just it's history. I mean, it gives a very detailed explanation of the Grecian Empire and all those empires up until the Messiah almost. But there's also a type of the Antichrist in that. So it's very important, and it's interesting how everyone was... The history is just, it was about Cleopatra is in there, Bernice is there, and the covenants they made and the marriages between them two, and this was written 300 years before it actually happened. So it's amazing, but it also shows about the end times, about what God is going to do at the end times. And then obviously chapter 10 is a very spiritual. There you get to learn about principalities and who controls nations, and that is what we study in chapter 10. And then 12 is the end of the time, and that is the consummation. That refers to how Daniel Revelation plays out.
You guys, all right. So I hope this is meaningful for you, and we encourage you to do your own study as well. And yeah, we will see you next week for chapter 10, 11, and 12. This week, if you have any questions on chapter 9, please write on our WhatsApp group. I hope it will be a blessed time for you. And may the Lord Jesus Christ bless you until we see you again in the next video.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.